I'm Luella. Standing on the stage of the Hartwell Community Hall, I look out at the sea of faces that once dismissed me as a failure. The room is deathly silent, and I can feel the weight of a decade of lies and misunderstandings hanging in the air. My father, standing a few feet away, his face a mask of shock and anger, is about to learn the truth that will shatter his world. It all started when I was 24, fresh out of graduate school. I had been on track to become a well-respected architect, the kind my parents could brag about at the country club. My father, Henry, was a prominent real estate developer in our small town of Riverton. He had built half of the new subdivisions on the west side, the shopping plaza, and the fancy office complex. Our family home was a mansion with a large swimming pool and a marble staircase. My mother, Edith, was a socialite who spent her days planning parties and maintaining our family's image. My older sister, Olivia, was the perfect daughter. She was engaged to a wealthy lawyer, Ethan, and was on her way to a successful career in law. At the dinner table, I announced that I had decided to take on a dilapidated old house that a contractor I'd interned with had offered me. I saw the potential in that house, room by room, as if it was whispering its secrets to me. But to my father, I had thrown away my future for a pile of broken boards and peeling paint. "You had a real future ahead of you," he said, his voice cold and hard. "Now you're acting like a common laborer." My mother just nodded, as she always did, following my father's lead. Olivia gave me a pitying look and said, "Not everyone has the drive to succeed, Luella." I didn't argue. I knew it was useless. 2 weeks later, I signed the papers on the old house, using a small inheritance from my grandmother, Mildred, and a loan from a local credit union. I foolishly thought my parents would be proud of my initiative. Instead, my father exploded. "You took out a loan against our family name?" he roared. "You're making us a laughingstock." And then he said the words that would haunt me for the next 10 years, "If you want to live like a nobody, then go live on the streets." My mother opened her mouth to say something, but my father's sharp look silenced her. She had been about to give me an envelope of money, a silent apology, but it stayed on the hallway table. I packed a single bag as the rain started to pour outside. I stepped onto the porch, and behind me, I heard the deadbolt slide into place and the porch light go out. I stood there in the cold, wet darkness, locked out of the only home I'd ever known. Olivia followed me to the gate. "Don't make a scene at my wedding," she said, her arms crossed. "Mom's already stressed." I told her I hadn't been invited, and that's when she said, "You're not a real last name." Real last names don't get their hands dirty. I got in my car and drove 2 hours to the city of Millfield. I had one contact there and one dilapidated old house. For the first 8 months, I slept in a shed behind the house on a cot with a small heater and my grandmother's old quilt. I learned to do every part of the renovation myself, so I could spot when someone was trying to cheat me. I framed walls, sanded floors, and priced lumber until I could dream in square feet. The house sold for almost double what I'd paid for it, and the credit union was impressed. I used the profit to buy 2 more houses, then 4. But it was a woman named Helen who changed everything. She was 82 years old, a feisty and sharp-tongued widow. She hired me to make her late husband's home livable so she could stay there instead of moving to a nursing home she couldn't afford. While I worked on her house, Helen told me about her friends. They were all in the same situation: too much house, too little money, and nowhere decent to go. That's when the idea hit me. Instead of just flipping houses, I could build affordable senior housing, places where people like Helen and my grandmother could live with dignity. I wrote the idea on the back of a paint can label and pinned it above my cot. I didn't know then that the company I'd build on that idea, company name, would one day be worth more than all of my father's developments combined. My grandmother, Mildred, was the only one in my family who supported me. She called me every Sunday, not to ask me to come home or to apologize to my father, but to ask what I was building. When I told her about Helen and my idea, she was silent for a long time. Then she said, "Build something that warms people's hearts, Luella." That's the real wealth. A week later, I received an envelope with $2,000 in it. It was her life savings, in $10 and $20 bills that smelled like her perfume. I called to refuse it, but she told me not to be silly. I kept that envelope in a drawer for over a year, not because I needed the money, but because it was a reminder of her love and support. 4 years passed. Company name, had 30 employees and a waiting list for our senior communities. We had opened 2 and were breaking ground on a 3rd. I deliberately kept a low profile, avoiding social media and newspaper interviews. I didn't want my father to be proud of my money. I wanted him to admit he was wrong about me. The only link to my old life was a joint checking account my parents had opened for me when I went to college. I had never used it much, just made a small automatic deposit out of habit. I never thought about it until my accountant, Maya, found it one ordinary Tuesday. "These withdrawals," she said, tapping a column on a print-out. "They've been going on for years, small amounts, but steady. And whoever is doing it has online access." I looked at the dates. They went back almost 6 years, and the total was just over $40,000. The withdrawals were authorized by Ethan, my sister's husband. I was shocked. I asked Maya where the money was going, but she didn't know. I tried to close the account, but the bank told me it was a joint account, and both my father and I needed to authorize the closure in writing. I was trapped by a piece of paper I'd signed when I was 18. I drove back to Riverton for the first time in years. The town looked smaller and more familiar, but also like a place that had once hurt me. I went to the diner and sat in a back booth. It didn't take long to hear my name. 2 women at the next table were talking about our family, and one of them said, "Poor Henry and Edith. Their younger daughter is such a disappointment, living off the state somewhere." On my way out, I saw the billboards for my father's latest project, Riverton Grand Estates. It was a luxury development of glass towers that didn't fit in our small town. I wondered where he got the money for such a large project. I met an old contractor, Jack, who had worked for my father for 20 years. He told me that the project was in deep trouble. My father had invested everything he had and was borrowing money from everywhere, including the church fund and the savings of local retirees. It clicked then. The money Ethan had been taking from my account was a patch, a way to keep my father's failing project afloat while they told everyone I was the failure. I drove home, not angry, but determined to bring the whole rotten thing down. 2 days later, a lawyer called. He said he had handled my grandmother's affairs and that she had left instructions for a sealed box to be delivered to me 2 years after her passing. I drove to his office and received a steel lockbox with my grandmother's handwriting on a tag. Inside were a letter and a deed. The deed showed that my grandmother had signed over a 40-acre parcel of land outside of Riverton to me years ago. She had written in the letter that she had seen my father borrowing against things that weren't his and that she knew I was the one who built instead of borrowed. I called my lawyers and asked them how a project like Riverton Grand Estates would fail. They explained that when a project runs out of money, the bank that holds the largest loan sells the debt, often at a steep discount, to someone who is willing to take the risk of collecting. I set up a small holding company and had my team watch the Riverton Grand Estates loan. It fell faster than I expected. But before I could close the deal, I learned that Ethan was also trying to buy the debt. He thought he was bidding against a faceless investor, not knowing it was me, the sister-in-law he had been stealing from for 6 years. I told my lawyers to win the debt at any cost. Riverton Grand Estates started missing deadlines, and the town panicked. Retirees who had invested their life savings were calling my father's office and getting no answer. My father decided to throw a fundraiser, a Save Riverton Grand Estates gala at the community hall. He sent invitations to the whole town, promising that a major partner was about to step in and save the project. 2 days before the gala, Olivia called. She didn't apologize or ask how I was. Instead, she asked me for money, saying that she and Ethan were having cash flow problems. She casually mentioned that Ethan had been moving family money around for years, thinking it was all above board. I realized that she had been living off the money he stole from me without a care. I told her I'd think about it, but I had no intention of giving her a dime. The night before the gala, my mother called. Her voice was weak and trembling. She told me about the night they put me out, how she had wanted to give me the envelope of money but was stopped by my father. But in the end, she still defended my father, saying he had done what he thought was right. I decided then that I wasn't going to destroy my father. I could have, but that would have meant the retirees who had trusted him would lose everything. Instead, I prepared a folder with the deed, the note, and all the proof. I also had a real plan to restructure the project and pay back the investors. At the gala, I walked in wearing a plain dark dress. The room fell silent as people recognized me. My father saw me and his face went through a range of emotions, surprise, contempt, and then he tried to put on his public mask. "Go live on the streets, Luella," he hissed at me. "You're embarrassing yourself." But this time, I was ready. I took the microphone from him and began to speak. "My name is Luella, last name. You've all been told I'm a failure, but I'm the founder of company name. We build senior housing, and we've done over $15 million in business last year. 3 days ago, my company became the partner my father has been promising you." My father tried to interrupt me, shouting and accusing me of being ungrateful. But I stayed calm. I held up the pages of evidence. For 6 years, Ethan has been draining a joint account my parents opened in my name, about $40,000 in total. And the loan for Riverton Grand Estates is pledged against a 40-acre parcel of land that my father claims is his, but it's actually mine. My grandmother signed it over to me years ago. The room gasped as the truth sank in. I then laid out my plan to take over the project, scale it down to something the town could afford, and pay back every investor in full. Ethan tried to negotiate with me quietly, but I told him we would fix this out in the open. The hall erupted in applause as people realized that the truth had finally come out. In the end, Ethan faced a civil investigation, and Olivia's perfect life fell apart. The cars were leased, the house was mortgaged, and their lifestyle had been built on stolen money. She left town within weeks. My father kept his house, not for his sake, but because my mother lived there. Riverton Grand Estates was no longer his, and the billboards came down. The town that once saw me as a failure now saw me as the one who came back and made things right. After the gala, my father found me in the parking lot. "So, do you forgive me?" he asked. I thought about the porch light going out, the deadbolt locking me out, and my grandmother's love and support. I said, "You told me to go live on the streets, so I went and built homes for others. That's the truth." I got in my car and drove back to Millfield. For the first time in 10 years, I felt free. The following spring, we broke ground on the 40-acre parcel. We named it Mildred's Place, a senior community where people could live with dignity. The investors got their money back, and I knew that my grandmother was smiling down on me. Looking back, I've learned that worth isn't something your family gives you or takes away. It's something you build, board by board, year by year, until the people who once underestimated you have to recognize your strength.